If you're anything like me, then the pandemic forced you to reevaluate many parts of your filmmaking. With everything in the world shut down and us all being stuck in our homes, we had more time to bake shitty bread, but we also had plenty of space and time to take a good hard look at the things that we were pouring all of our time and energy into and being really honest with ourselves about what we were actually getting out of it. I think with this new perspective, a lot of people, myself included, sort of realized that the traditional way of making movies and then getting them out into the world leaves a lot to be desired. I know that I personally had a reckoning like this myself. I was becoming really disaffected and unhappy with the way that I had been making movies previously, and I was ready to either find a new way of doing it or to just do something else entirely. Right around this same time, I met up with my friend Darin, and we had a really interesting conversation about this exact same thing. I think that we were both in a similar position of feeling disaffected by the way we had been doing things, and just sort of wondering if there was a different route that we could take. I should preface this by saying that Darin is one of the most talented people that I've ever met. We have a long history together. We met almost 10 years ago, and since that time we've shot 2 feature films together and a short film. Darin seems to have found that different route that we talked about. This past summer, he started making weekly short films, which he produces and releases at a blistering pace. I've been really inspired by this new outlet that he's discovered, and I've loved seeing him flex this new muscle. So I wanted to talk with him about his process of how he makes these, and how he thinks they're different from the prototypical way of making films that we both knew in the past.
So, I mean, sort of the whole genesis for this was like, I remember we met up back in like January, I think, like right before I moved to LA. And like, we were kind of having a conversation that sort of was about how we were both like searching for like new outlets for our creativity and like the kind of traditional ways we had been, you know, working on feature films and the kind of like, you know, months of pre-production and then like long shoot days with a big crew and then a long tail. And so I guess I was just wondering, can you talk about like where you kind of were at the beginning of the year or kind of last year maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I was kind of in the throes of waiting on festivals and pondering like what the next move could be. I had made a bunch of short films. Some of them, you know, all of them screened at festivals, but as is often the case, you get rejected from more festivals than you get accepted to. And I was in limbo waiting to hear back from several festivals about my last short film and just kind of feeling stuck about what the next move could be, because it seemed like the pervading wisdom was, you know, well, after the short films, you make a feature. And that route entailed like saving up at least an order of magnitude more money than it would take to do a short film, crewing up, maybe spending more time shooting something, and then, you know, thinking about the marketing, trying to get a star attached so that you could get some more financing, and then you try to get into festivals and then maybe get distribution. And all that felt like, especially at that time, like a crushing number of steps, even just to get to make something. And then just to get it seen was another, you know, dozen steps after that. And I started to really think, well, is that really the only option? I mean, that's an amazing thing. And no doubt that's still something I want to pursue. But can that really just be the only thing that I can do next?
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, how did the pandemic sort of play into this this feeling? Did that kind of make you reevaluate like this process like you're talking about?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I was when you and I talked in January, obviously we were past the pandemic, but I think the pandemic had that effect on everybody of just suddenly the usual avenues were not available anymore. And so I think for me, it made me refocus on just being creative for its own sake, because yeah, there weren't any festivals even to think about or consider. So that short film, Jared and Daughter, that I was, doing festivals for submissions for back in January. Myself and my writing partner, we wrote it during the pandemic just as a way of working on something. And I think maybe for a lot of other people too, the pandemic was a way to reconnect with that childlike part of yourself that just enjoyed making things for its own sake. And I definitely think that had an influence.
Yeah. I mean, I think me personally, just like the pandemic made me sort of like reevaluate the kind of long, arduous process like you're talking about of making a feature, and then the long tail of like submitting to festivals and waiting to hear back. And I guess I'm curious, like, are there specific parts of that kind of filmmaking process that sort of feel less like alive to you now than they did before?
I think I have less faith in festivals as being the gatekeepers that maybe I used to think of them as. I think they're definitely one channel, but I think it's really important to explore other avenues. As a filmmaker, I think you have to give yourself choices, and if you don't, you might be chasing after something that might not work for you. And I know for me, I don't like to wait. I don't like to wait to make stuff, and I also don't like to wait to show stuff. And I don't want that process to be interrupted by outside factors like whether it be waiting for financing or the movie's done, but we haven't been able to screen it for the audience because we're waiting for these festivals. And then you get into a festival and not everybody can make it. Like, I want to remove whatever barriers I can, both in the creative process, but also in the connecting with an audience process. And I think I've been finding that organically through experimenting with doing stuff online.
Well, so how did you get the idea to do this series? Like, where did the initial germ of the idea come from?
Yeah, I mean, I have to give credit to Josh Rubin for this, because he's always been like a very helpful and an open guide for me since we worked together on your movie. I reached out to him, the beginning of this year when I was feeling that feeling of being stuck. Like, what's the next move? Does it really have to be a feature? And I remember him saying that he has, been really loving discovering people online. There's people that he's followed that are doing like a short film every weekend, posting it online, that people are getting discovered there, that he's discovering people that he wants to work with there. And because he knows me, he's just like, I know you shoot and you edit and you direct. I mean, have you considered just doing like micro shorts? And through him telling me anecdotally about these other people that he's found online, it really started to click in my brain. Like, why am I holding myself back? Why have I not taken more seriously that there's this whole avenue that I haven't really considered of making stuff online, making short things, making micro things like, a minute or less. What could I gain from that? And I had not even considered it. And just hearing him talk about it as like, no, people are doing really interesting things there, you should check it out. I think you could do this. Really just literally just planted the seed. And I started to think and ruminate on it. And that's where the initial idea came from, that eventually became me getting my feet, wet, stepping into the arena.
I mean, the thing that I love about them most is kind of just like how they feel very effortless and joyful, and like you're talking about, like removing all the barriers of production and distribution. And like, I was wondering if you could just sort of walk through the process of like how one of them is made on a average time.
When I first started, I was scared to death that I would like fall flat on my face. I'm like, I've never done this. I've never made things that are less than 2 minutes, let alone stuff just for online. I think I was intimidated because I had this idea of, what the internet wants, and that it's not me, that it's not what I want to make. So I just didn't know what else to do other than just to make it. So I approached it the same way that I've approached short films. I then and don't now storyboard. I wanted everything to be shot very, very simply. because that's how I kind of get out of the way and allow something to happen really quickly. Nothing has to fit into this elaborate shot structure or edit that I have in my head. It's almost always shot, reverse shot. You know, you and I share an affection for shot, reverse shot. And then in the editing, you know, finding the best takes, finding what the rhythm of it is. But I wanted to contrast that with, you know, how is it different now? I think a lot of it has stayed the same in the sense I still shoot them with no crew. It's always just me. And it always starts with a script. Right now, all of my scripts are 2 people or 1 people. Back then, I was trying to do these 3-person scripts, and I don't really do that anymore. I want to keep it really simple and direct. So in the writing, I'm focused on just a relationship or just a 1-person thing, and it just simplifies. And then I'll find a day when the actors could get together. We'll come invariably to my house. That's another thing that I've been doing is I just always shoot at my apartment, because also I'm across the street from a park. So I have the option of an apartment scene and a park scene. And then we'll rehearse it just reading through once. If things are working, we'll go into shooting. If things aren't, maybe we'll cut a line, but it's all very quick. It's like 15 minutes. The actors, if they need makeup, they'll do it themselves in my bathroom here. And we'll immediately start mostly chronological order. We'll shoot it from top to bottom. I have a goal of always wrapping any given video in less than 2 hours. I don't want to be shooting for more than 2 hours on one script, just as a way of managing my energy and attention first and foremost, but also keeping with always feasibility. Like I want these to be a sustainable project over time. I don't want to have to always bank on people being available for an entire day even. And if I want to work around somebody's schedule, it's much easier to get them to say yes to a couple of hours. And now I don't normally shoot 2 in a day anymore. Now I focus on just doing one script. I want to shoot for 2 hours, then go home and use the rest of the day to edit. It's basically what I'm describing as building an assembly line. Thinking about the most efficient, straight ahead way to shoot, direct, write, and edit something. And not get in the way, not get too fancy, and have something be a model that could be swapped out every single time. And the only thing that changes is really the script.
Well, talking about kind of like the simplicity and the kind of paring it down as much as you can, what kind of like equipment are you using for these, and has that changed at all?
Yeah, that's definitely changed. That was part of the experimentation of it, is just trying out different cameras, different lensing, all with the mind of like, how can I reach a certain quality level, but still not feel like I'm falling over myself with gear. And because I've definitely veered into that territory on some of the videos. I have 2 cameras, mainly an FX6 and an A7S III. And I've alternated between the 2 of them as a way of experimenting. Like, you know, could I shoot all of this stuff on the FX6? And then I have a set of prime lenses and a zoom lens. And through whittling it down, I am now shooting everything on the A7S III with 1 zoom lens. It just is the lightest, easiest package to work with. It can do everything that I need it to do. And with the zoom lens, I'm not having to ever swap lenses out. And it's a package that I could throw in a backpack. And if I need to, as I have before, gone to somebody else's apartment to shoot, or I could jump on the subway and be anywhere and start shooting. The other components of this are lighting and sound. And that's another thing that I've experimented a lot with. I've whittled it down to just one China ball light, an aperture 300X, because it's bicolor and because it's a China ball. It can illuminate 2 people at once if I wanted to, or can illuminate 1 person. It's just the most versatile setup. I only ever want to use 1 light because I'm just me. So it allows me to pretty much do every setup that I want and get good lighting, a good soft lighting on people's faces, and not have to, you know, do a lot of color correction later or anything like that. And it's bright enough that I can get the exposure up. And similarly, it's just something that I can throw over my shoulder and jump on the subway. And then for sound, my favorite setup right now that I finally feel like this is what I'm going to use from now on, are these new Rode Wireless Pro mics, because they do two things that is super valuable. They record time code. So I have a time code box that runs into the A7S III. So audio syncing is instantaneous, and they record 32-bit float. So I never have to be like eyes on the meters, like, oh shit, I overloaded. We got to redo that again, or second guessing that I've set the meters too low and then I'm adding hiss. I can do anything I want with them. And they will always give crisp audio. And I'm not running into the tiny little preamp on the camera. So I'm getting the best quality that I can. You know, the Rode Wireless Pros will last for like 10 hours continuous. So I never have to look at them. The camera with 2 batteries, I could last, you know, with 1 battery, I could shoot a whole video. The whole idea is getting a setup that I literally don't have to think about. You know, I don't have to run back to the wall to get a battery. I never have to worry about in the back of my head, oh, did that overload the mic? Oh, am I running out of card space? All that is no, don't worry about it. You got it. So I feel like that took me a long time. I definitely have tried to shoot only on prime lenses. I've tried to shoot with the FX6 with timecode running into the BNC rather than audio. I've tried running sound into the camera and then having headphones to plug into the camera. But this setup is the best setup that I have.
Well, I wanted to go back to, because you were talking about actors and kind of enlisting people to be in this. And I know for myself personally, like whenever I'm trying a new like approach to something, or like something that's out of the norm of this kind of traditional feature film process, it's like I kind of struggle with how to present it to people. So I'm wondering, when you started doing this, like when you approached actors, like what was kind of your pitch for like what the project was going to be?
So basically I said, the idea is to make a series of small narrative shorts, shooting 2 or more per day was the initial idea, that incorporate a company of players model. And this was another thing I was thinking about, is using the same people and just rotating the scripts. And then I talked about myself. I'm a commercial and narrative director, DP. I've had work at Sundance, directed projects for Google, Chase, and Nike. So I'm trying to also win them over with my world-class accolades. But then pitching the tone, I said, my passion is creating surreal, absurd, yet grounded comedy. The dream is to make these little shorts every month with a trusted group of players and not wait for film festivals or other gatekeepers to get work in front of an audience. So that was how I kind of described it, that, you know, it's surreal comedy. I'm a Sundance director, but clearly I'm just trying to do my own thing right now, just every month. Do you want to be part of this company of players model?
I think what's interesting though is like we're talking about how you've pared the process down and it's very kind of like nuts and bolts and intimate, but then also at the same time you're kind of experimenting with like pretty high level like visual effects. Is that something that you've wanted to do for a while, and this is kind of a good excuse to like to experiment with that, because you don't really see like people that have such a facility for VFX kind of making weekly YouTube videos?
Yeah, I think it has been something that I've just always been interested in, and something I've learned through this process is to not think of the process as linear, in the sense that where does an idea come from? It could come from me learning a visual effect technique, you know, as some of my ideas have come from that. You know, one of my ideas called In a Car, one of my videos, really came out of the idea of, could I create a 3D model of something and put it in a place it doesn't belong? And that kind of reverse engineered me into this idea of a guy that was so much in his car all the time that he even drove it into his apartment to have dinner with his girlfriend and her roommate. This bonkers idea that I never would have thought about or had, you know, pursued had I not learned that technique. So sometimes learning the technique can feed the ideation process, and that feeds the creativity, and then that feeds, you know, learning a technique. You know, and I'm writing something now where I am on the other side of the process, where I'm thinking of an idea and I don't know how to do it. But because I love that process of learning and growing and challenging myself, and I know that kind of circle, and I love going around that, where like, you learn something here and it influences what happens here, and then vice versa, that it gets me excited to, okay, now I'm going to learn that technique. And isn't that exciting? Isn't that going to then enable me to do all these other ideas that I never would have thought about before? So going back to what I was saying before, one of the great things that has come out of this process for me is just being so open and not being narrow in how I think about where an idea comes from, or even like what makes a good idea. Like, I feel like I'm constantly challenging that, because I'm giving myself evidence all the time that no, it's you don't have to always get ideas from reading books or thinking as a writer. You can approach writing as a VFX artist, and that can be a totally legitimate way of making a video.
I'm sort of wondering, like, through the experience of doing this, what sort of modes of production or ways of doing things would you port into, like, a bigger project, like a feature film? Or, like, I mean, do you think that you could use this model of filmmaking to make something like a feature film, or vice versa? Like, what parts of that kind of traditional filmmaking do you think that you've decided to toss to the wayside forever?
I'm totally excited to do more projects this way, because I feel like I finally have a model that has been really kind of ground tested, as opposed to, you do a short film, you wait a while and you remember some of the things that worked, but then some other things aren't. Like, to really be working through this on a week-to-week basis has been really, really helpful. And I'm absolutely really excited to do this on larger projects. It does two things. One, it gives me a lot of confidence that I could hit a certain quality level just on my own with my own equipment. But then it also gives me a lot of clarity into, like, where bringing other people into the fold really has the maximum impact. I know kind of what I need, and I didn't always know that. I didn't always know, well, what kind of support do I really need behind the camera? I would do a lot of assuming, like, well, everybody tells me I should have an AC, so I would get an AC and they would just stand there all day because, like, I didn't really need that kind of support for a lot of the shooting that I do.
And just kind of wrapping up, like, do you have practical, like, nuts and bolts advice for somebody who's, like, watching this, who's like, yeah, I want to do that. I just want to, like, shoot stuff consistently, but, like, they feel stuck, or they don't know where to start, or they're kind of intimidated. Like you were saying at the beginning, you were sort of just like, I've never done this before. I don't exactly know how to start. Like, what would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I could say, but I think the biggest thing that I could say is that you will learn an order of magnitude more from a mistake made in front of people than you will a mistake made that nobody sees. And I think that is a guiding principle that I wish I would have learned 10, 20 years ago. Because they say, put yourself out there. But to really know what that means for me, it means creating and having an audience. That I need an audience, that I need to be creating for other people, for them to see, to get feedback, to connect. And that is an essential part of your growth as a creative person. So make your mistakes in front of people whenever you can. Get up there, put it online, any way that you can get people to see your stuff, and, fall flat on your face. But the things you're going to learn are going to show you who you really are. And I think that's the sooner you can start doing that, I think the quicker you'll grow. And then that's half the battle, is when you know who you are and what you want to do, then you just keep doing it.
I want to thank Darin for chatting with me today about his process. Be sure to check out his YouTube channel, which I've linked below. And if you want to see more videos like this about filmmaking, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.